BYU's efforts in the transfer portal have already paid off with the commitment of Darius Lassiter. What does he mean to BYU as he comes in to join them ahead of their Big 12 entrance? We're talking about that and BYU tight ends ahead on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for being an everydayer and making this your first listen of the day whenever you're listening and or watching it. Appreciate you guys being a part of the Locked On Cougars community. We're very proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto is your team every day, and as such, we are your only daily podcast focused on all things BYU. All right, diving right in on today's show. The bad news came earlier this week with Cody Epps deciding to enter the NCAA transfer portal, but hey, good news Tuesday. Darius Lassiter, who took an official visit to BYU over the weekend, officially announcing that he is going to commit, and he has committed, I guess I should say, to the BYU football program. A transfer who played one season for Eastern Michigan University this past year, had pretty modest stats by all accounts during his time with the Eagles. 40 receptions, 471 yards, an average of 11.8 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns, and a season long of 45 yards. EMU, more of a run-oriented offense. A little bit interesting how they run things out there. They have a very unique field as well. If you've never seen an EMU game, you may need some, advice to not adjust your television set. They actually play on a gray field, and it makes you think when you're watching on TV that your TV color is just kind of completely haywire. It's kind of funny that way. The only reason I know that is because I am a college football junkie and I watch Maction midweek throughout the entirety of the college football season. But that's an aside. I really like this pickup because I think stats-wise, he approached exactly what Cody Epps gave to BYU this past season. And the thought is that with him having 2 years of eligibility remaining, he should come in and offer some more to BYU. The nice part is he's got plenty of playing experience. You may hear me say one season at EMU and say, well, how young is he? He's actually not that young. He is officially going to be a redshirt junior, if I'm not mistaken, with 2 years of eligibility when he joins BYU. But before his time at EMU, he actually played for a time, actually 3 seasons in all, for Butler Community College, man, if I can get the right terminology there. He had 17 games and logged 51 receptions for an average of 18.1 yards per catch over those 3 seasons, the first of which he redshirted. It was a COVID year, so it didn't count at all. 924 yards during that time on those 51 receptions and 13 touchdowns. This is a guy who knows how to get in the end zone, and the nice part is he's got good size on him as well. 6'3", 200 pounds. He would dwarf Cody Epps, and I'm not trying to bag on Cody Epps, but he comes in and adds to an already pretty big BYU wide receiving corps. Because you think about it, they've got Keanu Hill, who is more of a Neil Pau'u type, 6'4", 200 plus pounds. Chase Roberts a little skinnier, but still plenty tall in his own right. I think they list him at 6'4" as well. And he probably weighs in about 200 on the dot. And now Darius Lassiter comes in and fills in a very nice hole in BYU's wide receiving core. And the good news is BYU still has a number of offers. We recapped them yesterday. Those of you who join us every single day know exactly what I think of all the 7 other guys BYU's offered so far in the transfer portal. And they actually added one more that we'll talk about here in just a moment. But it's really nice to see BYU not sitting back. They're being very aggressive. By all accounts, Darius Lassiter enjoyed his visit to BYU. He said, if I get it right this time, I'm lit for life, is the terminology he used when he announced his commitment to BYU. And it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in. But the nice part is he fills a hole immediately after the departure of Cody Epps and should fit in quite nicely to BYU's offense. Is he going to fit that the role that Cody Epps played as a kind of a slot receiver? No, I don't necessarily think he will, because I think that is going to go more to a guy like Parker Kingston, who has been working diligently in the program. Parker had a fantastic start to spring ball this year before breaking his hand, and he's expected, if he's not already, I'm sure, to be cleared and should be resuming workouts very shortly. He never stopped working working out in the weight room and the like. He actually had a splint on his hand for parts of the tail end of BYU spring ball. And we actually saw him in pads out there doing what he could, kind of catching balls with one hand, going through drills, getting those mental reps, as they call them, and that is going to lend itself to a guy like Darius Lassiter be able to come in and immediately impact the BYU football program. And this is, I think, a savvy pickup for BYU as they move forward here, trying to rebuild this wide receiving core. I think now you have a very clear, probably top 4 or 5, obviously headlined by Keanu Hill and Chase Roberts. I'd insert Parker Kingston as number 3 there, and then Darius Lassiter at number 4. And then probably the 5-6 guys right now are Koa Eldridge, and I'd probably give the nod to a guy like Dom Henry. And I know Hobbs Nyberg had some moments during spring ball as well, and he's probably running a little bit behind, but there are options on the roster, but BYU knows that they need to find more scholarship caliber guys to bring into this offense, obviously at the wide receiver position, to give Keaton Slovis as many opportunities to find big plays down the field. This is a guy, speaking of Keaton Slovis, there's one thing I know he can do. He's not afraid to sling it downfield, and he absolutely, if he feels like he's capable of making the pass, he will absolutely go after it and make sure that player has an opportunity to go out and make a play for this BYU offense. So, like I said, I'm bullish on his ability, speaking of Darius Lassiter, to come in and impact the BYU football program. I'm sure that he looked at the situation with Cody Epps leaving and said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to go and fill that hole for BYU and get more playing time. The hope is with extended playing time and a bigger a bigger emphasis on the pass in BYU's offense than what was shown at EMU, this should give him an opportunity to showcase more of his skills. I will give a tip of the cap also to Mitch Harper, my compatriot over at the KSL Sports Zone. He mentions this: Darius Lassiter comes to BYU with strong ties to the Big 12. He played his high school ball in Lawrence, Kansas. His father, Kwame, was an all Big 8 defensive back at Kansas for the Jayhawks and played a decade in the NFL, tallying 25 interceptions during his time as an NFL defensive back. His older brother, Kwame II, played wide receiver at Kansas and is currently with the Cincinnati Bengals. And as fate would have it, BYU's first Big 12 playing at Kansas on September 23rd, which I am planning on being in attendance at. I'm very much looking forward to that, but that just kind of adds another kind of I guess, a tidbit to all this conversation when it comes to BYU rebuilding this wide receiving core. So overall, I am pleased with the pickup. I do think that BYU will continue to work the portal, try and find as many options as they can out there to give them the best opportunity to have success on offense. I am bullish early on about BYU and where things stand right now for their offense. But the thing is that BYU has to continue to go out and find guys. There are a number of guys they've already offered when it comes to the NCAA transfer portal that I think could be very nice additions to this wide receiving core. And we'll find out if they're actually able to capitalize on some of the offers they have thrown out there. Maybe some of them were guys that were contingent, saying, hey, we're going to give you this offer, but it's contingent maybe upon you accepting it very quickly or coming on a visit. There are so many different things that go into this conversation when it comes to finding the right guys to come in and play for BYU. They obviously have to deal with the honor code. There's academic requirements. BYU and Kalani Sitake are very big on the culture they've established during his time there. So that's the other thing about this, is they're going to be very, very thorough in vetting any and all additions to this BYU football program. And I, for one, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what can happen here for the Cougars as they move forward into the Big 12 era. But Darius Lassiter, I guess first off, just say, hey, congratulations and welcome to BYU as a public welcome to that young man coming into the BYU football program. All right, coming up here in just a minute, I have been promising this since late last week. We're going to have a conversation about BYU's tight ends. It's the only position group we have not talked about coming out of spring ball. My thoughts on what I thought about them going into spring versus coming out, and also later on in the show, an exclusive conversation with Ethan Erickson, a guy who's expected to take on a bigger role for BYU this year, hopefully with more health. We'll talk about what he can offer to BYU and what he expects to do in a BYU uniform as today's show progresses. That's all coming up here in just a moment. First, a word on our friends over at Built Bar. You guys know I am a big fan of these things. If you're looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories in your typical snacks, that is where Built Bar comes in, my friend, because they are the best tasting protein bars ever. You got to try it. I promise you guys will enjoy them. They're healthy. They taste amazing. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. I cannot recommend them enough. They've been a big part of me getting healthier over the last 2+ years or so. Any of you who know me know that even offline, when I'm not doing this podcast, I crow about how much I enjoy them. Funny enough, I just got off the golf course before recording this podcast. I had to record a little bit early, so got done golfing, got home, actually grabbed a Built Bar on my way down to my studio to record, and very much enjoyed that treat. It was a grasshopper cookie flavor. It's one of my favorites. The best part is the macros on these things are absolutely insane. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. It's a whopping 17 grams of protein packed into each one of these bars. So get to your local Smith's and or Sam's Club today. You can pick them up in person today, or you can go to Built.com and place your order there if you don't mind waiting on the shipping. While you're on Built.com, you can save 15% on your order by using the promo code LOCKEDON15. That's LOCKEDON. Get 15% off your order, or if you need them right now, like I said, stop at your local Smith's and or Sam's Club today and pick them up. Get enjoying the best tasting protein bars, and do it with our friends at Built Bar. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen every single day, my friend. Every day is tomorrow on the show. We are hoping to have a special guest on the podcast. Actually, I got some multiple irons in the fire. I could go one of two ways. One could be former players talking about NIL and the impact of Cody Epps leaving the BYU football program, or the other could be a conversation introducing you more fully to what to expect from Baylor this coming season. So it's going one way or the other. It depends on how scheduling works out. One of them will probably come on our Thursday edition of the show, and then the next one will probably come on Friday. But get excited for that. It does mean we may have to move the mailbag edition of this week's podcast, so apologies for that if you were looking forward to that on Thursday, but just giving a little bit of a heads up. All right, time now to talk about BYU's tight ends. Now, we've talked a lot about wide receivers this week, and BYU's need to bolster the wide receiver position. One thing I think has been overlooked in all of this conversation and all the hubbub over Cody Epps leaving the BYU football program is the fact that BYU's tight ends can and should take on a bigger role in the passing game this year. Jaron Hall, for whatever reason, and I don't necessarily prescribe to, or I don't believe that I am vetted to talk about this directly. For whatever reason, targeting the tight end was just not part of his strengths. Zach Wilson, complete opposite. He made Isaac Rex look absolutely insane during that 2020 season. Many of you will recall that. But during the last 2 years with Jaron Hall under center for BYU, for whatever reason, the tight ends just were not targeted a lot, especially across the middle of the field. Is there a glaring hole in Jaron Hall's vision when it comes to looking for the tight ends? I don't know. But the hope is that Keaton Slovis will be able to find Isaac Rex more often. Now, Keaton has been very effusive in his praise about Isaac Rex in particular, saying that he was hoping he was going to go down and work out with him in California with John Beck. He said he's got daddy duty. Isaac just recently welcomed his first child into the world, so congratulations to the Rex family on that. But he is a guy that has been brought up time and time again, and for good reason. Isaac played at maybe, I would guess, 70% last year, and he struggled all season long. Many of you will recall this. He scored a number of touchdowns. He actually was second on the team in touchdown receptions, but he just never looked quite right. And it's probably because of the fact that he had a bunch of hardware, a bunch of metal pins and plates and all that type of stuff in his surgically repaired ankle. He had to undergo multiple surgeries, as he mentioned, for a compound dislocation of his ankle in that USC game at the tail end of the 2021 season. He battled back. He never complained. He just continued to work and work and work to get himself back into shape to at least play last season. So many people on BYU, and I had conversations with multiple individuals in the lead up to that season that thought, hey, if he gets back at any point in this season, it's gravy. What does he do? He's there for the entirety of training camp. He goes throughout the entire season and never complained. You could tell he was hurting at multiple points. We'd see him during practices, during training camp, seemingly hobbling around. But when the snap happened, it seemed like he was battling through everything and just kind of forgot it and went out and made plays. He had all that hardware taken out of his ankle earlier this offseason. And I got to say, night and day difference in terms of his ability to move, run, etc., jump, cut, all that type of stuff during spring ball. That pretends to me that Isaac Rex, the elk himself, should have a bounce back season this year. And that should obviously help take some of the strain off of BYU's rebuilt wide receiving core. A guy like Isaac Rex is an NFL caliber tight end when he's at his absolute best. 6'6", 260 pounds, strong as an ox, has a very adept ability to block when called upon, but also very soft hands, and actually is surprisingly nimble and fast for as big as he is. He's like I don't know how to describe it properly. He is an incredible, incredible athlete. Does not get his due, I don't think, necessarily when it comes to the tight end position. Right behind him is a guy we're going to hear from here in just a minute is Ethan Erickson, 6'5", 240 pounds. He's kind of the next guy after Isaac Rex, I think is going to be the 1-2 tandem at tight end this year for BYU. Ethan changed his number from 97 to 87 this year. You'll hear him explain why here in a moment, but he's got all the ability, if he stays healthy this year, to be a breakout star. The coaches love Ethan Erickson's ability. He is actually a more pure pass catcher than I think almost any other tight end on this list. And that may also outdo a guy like Isaac Rex. And Isaac has got incredible hands. So you got to have some hope there. The other thing about this is they had a little bit of a sensation in Anthony Olson during not during training camp, during spring ball. Many of you recall that sidearm pass from, I think it was Jake Retzloff, that number 85 caught with one hand and hauled in. That's Anthony Olson. He's a preferred walk-on who comes from Olympus High School. BYU actually flipped him late in the recruiting sphere to come to BYU. He redshirted and was on the scout team last year, but in spring ball, very impressed with him. He's got a great body. They list him at 6'4", 235 pounds, and his frame looks like he can adapt to more weight if needed, but he's a very nice player, I think. He's a basketball guy who grew up playing hoops, but has translated that to the football field, and I'm really, really intrigued by him and to see what he might be able to offer down the road here. Now, the other name that I'm interested in, because he is a guy that during the recruiting era of his high school days, had an injury that really knocked down a lot of the interest he had, but he was a 3-star prospect, but is now a walk-on with BYU, is Nason Coleman. Now, he's a freshman from Chandler, Arizona, Chandler High School, one of the powerhouses down there in the Arizona prep ranks. I think a guy like Nason Coleman is probably a developmental guy, but he showed some things during spring ball that made you think, okay, there is skill there. He's not the tallest wide receiver. They actually list him at 6'3", and he might not be much taller than 6'2", but regardless, he's got nice receiving ability. And as a walk-on, he's a low-risk, potential high-reward type guy if he lives up to his billing. They also list both Mason Wake and Mason Fakahua, both Masons who will play more of that H-back / fullback / whatever role you want them to play, also are listed at tight end, and both of them bring different skill sets. Air Wake, as we all know, Mason is a guy who is not afraid to jump over dudes. He is slimmed down. He looked far less what do I say? How to say this properly? He looked far less. I don't know how to say this. I'm screwing up the terminology in my head. But he slimmed down, and he looked like he was fitting better into BYU's offense at the slimmed down weight he was playing at. They list him at 6'1", 260. There's no way he's 260 right now. He is obviously slimmed down from that 260 mark. That's probably from last year's roster, just kind of carried over to this year. But Mason Fakahua, who has played some tailback for BYU during his time as a Cougar, has now bulked up. As they list him at 6'2", 240 pounds, and they really like his receiving ability. He is more suited for what Mason Wake does, where he's a blocking back when called upon. He can go out as kind of that split end for BYU and some of the run packages. Can really come downhill and really devastate oncoming linebackers on poles and that type of stuff. That's what I like about both of these guys. They offer the receiving element, but at the same time, if you need them to play that quote-unquote true fullback, they're not afraid to put their hat in there and absolutely get after it. Mason is a guy that I actually expected might explore the NFL after this past season. It's good to have him back for a quote-unquote super senior season, and I would assume that he is expecting to take on a huge role this year for BYU. And the nice part is Mason proved at the tail end of the 2021 as well as parts of last season that he's more than capable despite standing just 6'1", that he can play actually the true tight end position. BYU threw him out there when Isaac Rex got hurt against USC. I apologize, my nose is running a little bit here, so apologies for that. But he mentioned that the coaches mentioned that when they put him in there, they had no idea. He had never practiced in that what they call their Y tight end or their inline tight end, which is more of what Isaac Rex and Ethan Erickson play during that game against USC, and they weren't sure how Mason was going to do in that role. And he did swimmingly. He did fantastic. And they realized, hey, this guy is more and more of a weapon than we ever could have thought he was. And I would assume now that he's slimmed down a little bit and looks like a better athlete overall, I guess that's probably what I should have said earlier about him. I think you can expect that he will take on a bigger role for BYU this year, even more so than he already has. He will continue to leap over dudes. He will continue to put his shoulder down on guys and run dudes over. But the nice part is Mason has really become a multifaceted athlete. I think of him, and if you're a San Francisco 49ers fan or if you watch the 49ers, you'll know the name Kyle Juszczyk. He's a fullback is what they list him at, but he plays tight end. He plays H-back. He does play fullback in rundowns, that type of stuff. Mason Wake is BYU's version of Kyle Juszczyk, and expect to see number 13 lining up all over the football field. So my overall takeaway from BYU's tight end unit is just simply due to what I saw from these tight ends, despite it being thinned out due to some medical retirements and guys moving on. It's actually a really nice unit, I think, overall. Isaac Rex, Ethan Erickson will be your true tight ends, 1-2 combo for BYU. But you also can throw a guy like Mason Wake, Mason Fakahua, and even a guy like Anthony Olson out there in spot duty. I expect that the top three will obviously be Mason Wake, Erickson, and Rex as your top three guys at the tight end position, depending on the role that's being asked or the play call, the formation that's out there on the football field. But you will not see much of a drop-off, if any. And my stock is very, very much up on this tight end position coming out of spring ball. And I think that could take some of the strain. If they can live up to their billing and a guy like Keaton Slovis can find them more often, that will take some of the pressure off this wide receiving core that's being rebuilt on the fly and put a little more on the tight ends, which I guarantee you, tight ends, they love blocking. Trust me, they've signed up for it, but they love nothing more than catching that ball and scoring touchdowns. So if you can deliver the ball to them more often than it has in the last 2 years, that's going to make the tight end unit all the more effective and obviously help out BYU's offense as a whole. All right, coming up here in a minute, as promised, Ethan Erickson had a great conversation with him that we will get to momentarily right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate you guys making it a part of your routine whenever you listen to it. We have a number of options out there when it comes to your podcast, but thank you to the thousands of you who tune in via YouTube, also to the thousands of you who listen to us via regular podcast means. You guys are absolutely awesome. We actually, for an off-season month, which is what we call the month of April, May, June, they're called our off-season months. We actually set a record for overall number of listeners last season on our regular podcast feeds. YouTube continues to grow every single month. YouTube continues to reset and reset the record almost every month, it feels like, for subscribers, views, all that type of stuff. But in terms of our overall podcast listening audience, we've been established on Apple and Stitcher and Spotify and Google Podcasts for years now. We're in year 5 of this venture. And you guys set a record for the month of April alone last month. So thank you for the support. Thank you for checking us out. All right. Time now to let you hear from Ethan Erickson. Had a great chat with him. Had a lot to say about his health status, what he hopes to accomplish, what he takes away from spring ball, heading into the summer, and obviously into training camp. So without further ado, Ethan Erickson right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.
You haven't participated a lot in spring ball, but what do you feel like you've accomplished in spring?
So my biggest goal going into this spring was just building a relationship with the teammates around me. Because eventually I want to be a leader of this team. That's my goal. It should be everybody's goal. And so because I've only been able to do so much, I really take time in meetings and in workouts to connect with those around me so they can, like if they have questions about things, they can turn to me and kind of lean on me a little bit. Because I've been here it's going into my 3rd year. So I've kind of been around a little bit. And so I'm hoping what I was hoping from this spring ball was that I could just build that trust, build that communication and relationship with those around me. And I feel like I did that pretty well.
I think most people point to Isaac Rex and then you as kind of the top 2 at tight end. And you mentioned how you've been here for 3 years. Do you feel like you're finally stepping into that leadership / mentor role?
Yeah, it's definitely been hard. Isaac's just such a great tight end. Yeah. He's got that poise just in his pass pro, and then his route running looks so effortless. And so it's really, really hard shoes to fill. I feel like I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely closer than I was, a year ago, 2 years ago. And it's just kind of just 1% better every day, trying to fill those shoes of his, because he's definitely left a mark on this school.
Okay, here's the thing. There's a fan-run thing where they call him the Elk out there.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Is that do you as teammates get on him about that? Okay.
So I think we saw it. It's like his deep blue, like he was watching a film breakdown or something.
Yeah.
Someone's wearing a moose T-shirt or an elk T-shirt.
Elk T-shirt, yeah.
And so we're all looking, what the heck is this? So then finally, we're talking to Isaac about it. We don't give him a hard time, just joking around with him. But yeah, no one here calls him that.
I had to ask because actually a buddy of mine who I think originally coined it. So it's just one of those funny things that still exists out there. Every time it seems like he gets mentioned, somebody inevitably on social media will grab an elk GIF and throw it up for him or whatever.
It's definitely he definitely owns that. If somebody posts that on Twitter, it's talking about him.
Okay, from your perspective, how has fatherhood changed him?
It's only been a week.
I know it's been a short time. But.
Yeah. I can't really say that it has so far.
Okay.
I feel like he's probably got more mature.
Okay.
But he's still goofy. He's still fun to be around. Still cares about all of us. I think he just kind of realized. I think it's helped him locked down a little bit more, because he's already been locked down. He's been that guy, but it kind of gave him a bigger purpose to behind his lifting, behind his practicing every day. I mean, he's got a son now.
Yeah. Did somebody force you to change your number out of the 90s, or is that a personal decision?
No, it was a personal choice. So I was 87 in high school.
Okay. So you've been waiting on that number?
I've been waiting on it. So Britt Hogan was our long snapper.
Yeah.
So he finally last year, and so I was like, oh, I gotta snag it before anybody else does. And I didn't expect to get until spring or until fall camp. And then talking to Josh, our equipment guy, he was like, oh yeah, I got you. I was like, oh, let's freaking go. Pull up my jersey first day, 87. I was like, oh. Really happy, because they just gave me 97 when I got here. I didn't ask for it.
So it wasn't a request. It was just like, here's your number, you go for it.
Yeah, so my first year when I was redshirting, I mean, I didn't really think I had a choice, so I just stuck with it. And then the second year, I was like, oh, I'm going to try to own it a little bit. And then I realized 87 looks way cooler. It's like, it's got way more meaning to me, because I grew up watching Gronk. I was like the guy that I would just watch. He was my motivation, so 87 is kind of an important number to me.
Well, you kind of took a question away. I was going to ask you, like, who you pattern your game at. Is it Gronk? Is it the guy you look at?
It's really hard, because Gronk does something really well, something not as well. Even though he'll probably go down as best tight end of all time. I patterned a lot after Travis Kelce with his route running abilities. And then George Kittle with his blocking. That's kind of who I watch film on. I mean, it's easy to just say those big three, but then there's like T.J. Hawkinson and Darren Waller, like all these guys. So I kind of just take bits and pieces from everyone that I like and think will make me a better player.
Who is, well, I guess, how is this question the right way? What is the best part about Coach Clark?
I could go on for 35 hours about this.
Okay.
I absolutely love him with a passion. Everything about him is how passionate he is. He's more happy for us on plays we do good than we are ourselves, and he'll coach us harder than we will ourselves. Like he's there for everything. He cares about us more than just a player. Like he treats us as his own children, and I felt that. As long as I've known him, I could feel that he just 100% cares about me. He calls me, makes sure I'm doing okay. Like it's more than a game to him. And he treats us all. He says, no judgment. If things happen or however they turn out, he's gonna love us regardless. And that's the biggest thing, is he loves us. Every day he tells us he loves us, and like I've become accustomed to telling him I love him back, because I really do.
He's not adverse to turning a phrase, as I like to say. Like, he's got some really fun ones when we talk with him in the media. Do you have a favorite? Or is there one that comes to mind, I guess?
So he takes things from his high school coach, because he played at like Provo High.
He's mentioned to me that his high school coach is an inspiration for a lot of them.
And so the way he says here, he says it normally the first time, like if he's like pointing at something, he's like, oh, I hear it. He goes, here, and like kind of like emphasizes a little bit. That's shoot. Oh, I wish I could think about that one a little bit longer, but yeah, he's always pulling stuff like, oh yeah, my high school coach used to say it, and it says the most out of pocket thing.
Okay.
I'm like, what kind of high school was he at?
Old school, right?
Yeah.
Old school. All right. Last couple of things from me, but obviously you've been sitting out most of the springs already established, but what do you feel like you need to work on most during the summer here, getting ready for fall camp?
Everything.
Okay.
So
that's okay.
I really just want to grow and be better. I'm only about 238 right now, 240-ish. I want to get up to about 245, like solid 245. Obviously, I want to be healthy, so I want my hamstrings to get better. And then for fall camp, I want to be better at blocking. To keep my hands tight, pad level, feet running. I feel like a lot of times I stop on contact, and that's not what I want to do. I just want to run through a guy and put him in the ground. And then obviously route running, I feel like is one of my strong suits, but you can always be better. So I want to be a more fluid route runner, just have more fun off the ball instead of being like kind of robotic, which I've come some ways from doing. That's kind of how a lot of guys are when they get here. They're trying to remember the playbook, trying to remember everything, so it stops them from being the athletic, fluid player they are. Yeah. And so I've been working and continue to work on just completely knowing the playbook inside and out, so that I can have fun and give some character and personality in those routes that I'm running.
How excited are you to be part of the BYU team that's going to be the first team in the Big 12?
It still hasn't hit me yet.
It hasn't set in?
Yeah. Because the biggest stadium I played in, because I didn't travel my redshirt year, and then last year traveling, I can't even think where the most intense stadium was Oregon, and then we're going to go down and play Texas, TCU, Texas Tech, West Virginia, all these schools that are, big, loud, scary schools. But I think we can handle it. I'm super excited. I think it's going to be something really fun. I'm looking forward to it.
There you go, Ethan Erickson. A big thank you to him for taking the time. And the hope is, that his health issues that kind of necessitated he take some time off during spring ball are obviously well behind him, and he will have a healthy training camp. And I honestly, the coaches have raved about his ability. Aaron Roderick has gone on the record multiple times throughout 2021 and 2022 saying that, hey, Ethan Erickson's kind of got next here at tight end for BYU. So do not be surprised. Number 87 kind of burst to the scene this fall and turn some heads. You will know about that if you've been listening to this Locked On Cougars podcast, because you'll have heard it here first. So big thank you to Ethan Erickson once again for taking the time. Now, I apologize. I meant to mention this earlier, but BYU has extended another offer in the transfer portal circuit to Ja'Day Walker. He is actually from Grand Valley State. And if I'm not mistaken, Grand Valley State, the Lakers are a Division II program, but this is a guy that's interesting to me because he is a guy that's got great size. They list him on the GVSU website at 6'4", 185 pounds. He is a sophomore from Cleveland, Ohio. And the thing about this is his 2022 season actually had some decent numbers, but BYU apparently is betting on this guy being a bigger player. This past season, in 11 games played, 30 receptions, 623 yards, averaging an insane 20.8 yards per carry on average. Also scored 4 touchdowns. In 2021, his first season with Grand Valley State, saw action in 6 games, only 2 receptions for 28 yards. So in many ways, this is a similar, as we talked to yesterday on the podcast, of a guy that you're betting on maybe bringing in and developing his talent while he's at BYU. You can't teach 6'4". That's the one thing about this is I trust Fesi Satake and Aaron Roderick when it comes to doing their homework. They watch hours and hours and hours of film. And if they think this guy can translate from, if I'm not mistaken, I think Grand Valley State is Division II to the FBS/Power 5 level. Who's to say that I'm wrong about that? It's a little bit of a crapshoot to give a guy like this the offer because he is jumping up multiple levels. But as I said, the track record that Fesi Satake in particular has had in his development of his wide receivers during his time at BYU leads me to think that he sees something in this young man. And if he decides to pounce on the offer from BYU, who's to say that he could not be one of the next guys to come out of that wide receiving core and make good on the bet on himself, having decided to transfer out of Grand Valley State. The other thing about this is he does have 2 years of eligibility remaining. So he is a guy similar to some of these other wide receivers that are in the portal that has extended time that he could come in and develop and be a bigger part of BYU versus being there for just one season. And that's it. It's a one-shot deal for a guy like that. So some positive news on that front as well. And any other offers that continue to roll in throughout the week, of course, we'll have you covered right here on the podcast. So thank you once again for making us your first listen of the day. Hope you guys have had a fantastic day whenever you're listening and or watching us. As I mentioned, everydayers, make sure you join us tomorrow. I'm working on kind of going one of 2 ways here. Former player, or we're taking a look at Baylor with a special guest host on either one of those. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. We'll get to that. And obviously, hope you guys have a fantastic day once again whenever you hear and or watch this. Hope you guys are all doing well once again. And of course, we'll reconvene tomorrow right here on Locked On Cougars. See ya.